So a few months ago, I had the wonderful opportunity to do our second live retreat for survivors of narcissistic relationships. We met for 3 days over a beautiful, sunny, just perfect weather weekend in the Hudson Valley of New York. We came together in community, we talked about healing, we did different exercises together as well. And one of those exercises revealed an interesting commonality across several survivors, probably most of them that were in that room, but I could only see the data at that point from just a few. Once I get all the data, I'm going to tell you more. But I asked folks in the group to share the things that they did in their narcissistic relationship to manage the relationship, the workarounds, the things to manage the reactivity, the things that they did in the relationship before they understood exactly what it was they were dealing with, the behaviors that they engaged in to keep the peace, to keep things from escalating, to avoid being blamed for everything. To take a minute, you can even pause the video after I ask this question, but what do you think the most common behavior people engaged in? The thing that people most often did in these relationships? Like I said, you can pause, toss your guess in the comments. Folks in the comments might have already given you the answer. So I am sure, even as you're thinking about this, that you may be thinking about or suggesting things like appeasing, perhaps the fawning, even though that's not something you're doing, it's happening, fixing, solving, doing, silencing, and all of those are big things people do. But the one behavior that came out as unanimous in a subset of attendees at this retreat who shared their experiences in narcissistic relationships was walking on eggshells. Now, walking on eggshells is this pattern of censorship, choosing every word carefully, being very careful in everything you do, silencing your needs and wants, not bringing up issues that will trigger the narcissistic or antagonistic person in your life. It's this subjective experience in these relationships where self-abandonment meets hypervigilance, which are obviously almost universal in these relationships. In these kinds of relationships, we are always scanning the room with them, trying to figure out, are they in a good mood? Are they in a bad mood? And because self-blame is another universal ingredient in these relationships, we assume that it is the things that we do or say in the relationship that are the problem. And listen, I'm not going to lie to you here. The things that you do or say may in fact be what triggers this narcissistic person, but that doesn't make you the problem. It's the narcissistic person who can't regulate. And the unpredictability, the reactivity, and the dysregulation of the narcissistic person is what leads people to walk on eggshells. In essence, you've often put yourself in a role of being the emotional support animal that they use to calm down. But it doesn't always work, and thus even the emotional support animal is not as careful as a person in a narcissistic relationship. I found it interesting that it was the universal thing. That these people who were giving their answers, they responded differently to many other things, but this was the universal. The people were sharing what happened. These were relationships of differing levels of severity of narcissism. Some were marriages, some were family relationships, some were workplace relationships, but the walking on eggshells was a common denominator. Many people in narcissistic relationships tell me that they are tired, exhausted, always feel a bit disoriented. There's a constant sense of tension and even panic right under the surface. And all of that makes sense, right? The grief in a narcissistic relationship is that in a way we actually do know a little about what could calm this narcissistic person down. We question nothing, we say nothing, we ask for nothing, we be nothing, we go along, and it works-ish. Because even if we do all of that, it can still go to hell. Because we're still going to be blamed for their boss being angry that day, or the rain that fell on their golf game, or their dress not fitting. So the walking on eggshells is also a walk of grief. Over time, we don't even realize we are walking on eggshells. We may wonder why we get sick a lot. And then, perhaps, we find ourselves spending time away from the narcissistic person. Something happens. They go out of town. We go out of town. But something that they're out of our day-to-day life. And we notice a difference in ourselves, but we can't quite name it. And we're so used to carrying the tension that it does become normalized. The grief is the awareness, when you see it, is that the eggshell walking was the only way this relationship worked. So it didn't really work. It's like jury rigging an appliance. Yes, the appliance works, but only if you hold the switch down the whole time. And if you actually got an appliance, this new appliance that worked properly, and you don't have to hold the switch down the whole time, it feels like liberation. It's the same thing here. Now, if the narcissistic person in your life is a boss or colleague or business partner, you may feel the release when you get home and the dread in the morning when it's time to go to work. If the narcissistic person in your life is a family member that you only see from time to time, you may feel that tension release when you leave and don't need to see them for a while, and feel the tension build as the days and weeks come up before you're going to see them or travel to see them. But if the narcissistic person is someone you live with every day, where escape is not possible, the chronic and cumulative exposure is going to take a far greater toll. If you grew up with narcissistic/antagonistic parents, this is a very exhausting way to be a kid. You may have memories, for example, of staying silent at dinner, feeling that you had to eat when you weren't hungry, watching your mouthier sibling having hell to pay for speaking out. It could manifest as being a kid who was nervous as hell and trying to keep the house perfectly clean and be hyper alert and be aware that you didn't leave a toy out or your bike in the wrong place or your basketball in the wrong place, and have almost culty levels of obedience to the parent. Now, of course, this is a parent who is not at all attuned to the child, but expects obedient devotion from everyone. As a child, you may take on sports or other activities or school subjects in which you have absolutely no interest, but above all else, the child really learns to never complain. The child lives in a chronic state of tension, wondering what version of the parent is going to walk into the door, the cheerful one or the angry one, the scary one or the actually kind of fun one. Now listen, as someone who grew up like this, let me tell you this. My chronic migraines and my other health issues did not come out of nowhere, folks. I am very aware of why they are. And I still find that the only way I can fully relax is when I'm in a room by myself, because other people mean eggshells. It sucks, but them's the legacies we are left with. Part of it is to be compassionate with them once we know about them in ourselves. Now, the funny thing about walking on eggshells is that the narcissistic folks will actually become quite angry if they perceive that you are being ultra careful around them. Their belief is that they are the cool, flexible, healthy one. So if the perception is that people are walking on eggshells and are worried that the narcissistic person is fragile or will blow if you say the wrong thing, well, that can result in its own fallout. And the narcissistic person might start raging at you and saying, "Don't treat me like I'm crazy." Well, that said, especially when we are talking about more malignant and severe presentations of narcissism and antagonism, at that level, those folks, I have to tell you, they kind of get off on the fear and tension that other people carry around them. Like it's almost like everyone's kind of scared of them and they like that power. So it may even be a little rewarding for them to watch people eggshell walking in their presence, or they might even say boo to see who will jump. When we chronically walk on eggshells, we devote the vast amount of our psychological bandwidth to staying safe rather than to thriving or being curious And that's unfortunately and really quite tragic, frankly, because it limits our growth. It holds us back. It keeps us from being in the world and enjoying life. And it is easily a pattern we can fall into again and again, even in future relationships, because it feels normal. Pay attention to your body the next time you're talking with someone safe, where the vigilance and eggshell walking are not necessary. Contrast that to how you feel with the high demand, high antagonism people you have to interact with, and notice, where do you feel the differences in your body? And also notice how tired or uplifted you feel after spending time with someone, depending on the situation and the person. Our bodies are tense when we walk on eggshells, so much so that you might even feel literally sore, like muscle tension sore, after you spend a lot of time with a narcissistic person. And it makes sense. The muscular tension accumulates in you and you ache. But this universality of the narcissistic relationship, this eggshell walking, it caught me a little by surprise that this was the one thing. Nothing else was universal, but this was. I suppose it shouldn't have, because actually walking on eggshells really represents sort of a hybrid crossroads between self-silencing, self-abandonment, and hypervigilance, all of which are common in these relationships. Walking on eggshells in some ways also allows the illusion of the narcissistic relationship to persist, because as long as we walk on eggshells, it can give the fantasy to the world and even to ourselves that the relationship is kind of working. I mean, listen, it's less likely, maybe nobody's yelling, there's no conflict, but it is an illusion, as most things in narcissistic relationships are, except the toll it takes. That part is real. So pay attention to this, and maybe especially if you've had more than one narcissistic relationship, think back to how often you were walking on eggshells, and was that a universal theme in all of them? And contrast that to how you feel when you're talking to someone where the eggshell walking isn't necessary. The difference is profound, especially when you have two of those experiences happen at the same time, same day kind of thing. You'll notice it, pay attention to it. Because like I said, it's really, really taking a toll. There's all this churning happening in you that you're not even aware of sometimes when you're with the narcissistic person. Because if we spend enough time with someone like this, the walking on eggshells just becomes how we go through the world. I hope that was helpful. Thanks again.